We started up in the immediate aftermath of the earthquakes here. Everything got impacted, but the cultural life of the city got disproportionately impacted because the buildings that came down in the initial earthquake were the cheap, low rent, an upstairs room where a bunch of amateur dance groups had classes and social gatherings and stuff, and so we lost that. And so we started using the vacant sites where the buildings had been demolished to try to both facilitate, kind of recapture some of that cultural life, and then also kind of bring it out into public a bit more, where actually more people encounter it. And we've grown from that into the word that governments and such like to use as placemaking. So we usually call ourselves a placemaking agency now. So we create events and installations and feed into city master plan processes and things like that to try to get more people to participate, a bit more community mindedness. I feel like a lot of emphasis in cities goes on the kind of commercial side of things, developers and businesses and so on, and obviously that's really important, but I think our role's been to try to diversify that a lot and provide little offerings or glimpses where a wider range of people might see something in the city and go, oh yeah, that kind of encapsulates my values or represents me in some way. It was therapy for those of us who started Gapfiller in the early days to, how can we leave our stamp and kind of show people what we think the city should be like? And then kind of through that, we've been told that, hey, have you heard of the 5 ways to well-being and these sorts of things about feeling connected to the place where you live and, growing important relationships with people because you have some values in common or you're sharing a common mission or whatever it might be. And so I'd say we've come to thinking more deliberately about well-being, kind of from being taught, but we came in through the back door or something.
Rekindle was founded by Juliet Arnott, and she is an occupational therapist. So it's based on the occupational therapy values of the idea that what we do changes the way we feel. Craft is an inherently transformative process, both internally and externally. Externally speaking, we can take a material such as the te koka leaf, comes from a cabbage tree, and weave it together, transform it into something really useful, like this basket here. But also internally there's a transformation that occurs. The process of working with our hands and the materials demonstrates and is evidence to us that we have strength and we have focus and we have capability. So it builds on our sense of self-efficacy and builds our esteem in that regard as well. Being in the process of craft connects us. It's a space that we can be in where we can be focused and present and in the moment, which is a really important thing in today's modern world where we're balancing multitasking or working off screens or other sort of less active occupations. So to have that counterbalance is really great for our well-being. Working together as a group in a class is really great for people to feel connected socially. We all have a shared purpose or a shared goal when we're trying to make something or learning how to make something. Well, there's also the sense of well-being that arises in the act of caring for what's around oneself, so caring for the environment. So we work with materials that might otherwise go to waste. And I guess people might come along wanting to learn a craft, but then learn more about or realise that they're also working towards sustainability for the environment as well.
The Taja is an ancient Māori weapon, a traditional martial art that our people once used in warfare. And the purpose of training in this art form nowadays is about bringing all of the pride of the culture from the warrior days into the present time, using the Taja as a vehicle for promoting the survival of the Māori language, for promoting physical fitness, spiritual and mental wellness, for bringing people together and using something that had warrior values to it and finding a new way to be warriors in the common day. What it basically means to stand strong in this world and to find ways to express ourselves and to celebrate who we are. Now, there are very few things that we need in life. We need connection, we need purpose, and we can come together over a simple activity to help people celebrate who they are, and within our city to help people build relationships. We know relationships are such a key to building healthy communities. I think everyone wants to belong somewhere. We all need places where we belong and where we feel safe and where we can be part of a wider whānau, a wider community network without too many expectations on us other than to just turn up and find a space where we can be a part of a group, part of a family, and that's good enough. You're good enough as you are, the way that you arrive.
So we're a creative community for people who've experienced mental distress in Christchurch. The experience in Christchurch of the earthquakes is the catalyst for Otautahi Creative Spaces setting up, but really the need was there long before the earthquakes, and it's about having places to go where you can explore and express who you are and create the world and the life you want for yourself, and creativity is one really powerful way of doing that.
Should we try and pull it out together?
We have a collective of around 80 artists who come together around what they love. So there's all sorts of art forms being created. So this weekend we've got a quilt workshop happening, but people work in print, making, sculpture, painting, you name it. Being absorbed in the creative process takes us out of ourselves. We can actually put aside the worries and the stresses of life and become absorbed and be in the zone. In our busy lives, that's a really important thing for people to be able to do. Art and creativity is a really powerful tool for transformation. So for the artists who are part of this collective, we see amazing changes. When people first come in, they've often experienced disadvantage and exclusion, but by being part of this creative community, they're able to make incredible changes in their life. So whether it's exhibiting, selling their work, teaching others, finding work, going on to other study, and really seeing changes in their families as well, because people are seen as having strengths and talent, and so we see the artists here as being champions of creative wellbeing in their families and the wider community. We want to see a rethink of the mental health system, so we want to see art and creativity as being front and centre, rather than the emphasis that goes on medication and on clinical treatment. We think there's a really important role for creativity in helping people create aspirations and have hopes for their future, which they are more in control of and which enable people to really thrive.
Tēnā koutou katoa, i ngā mana whenua tēnā koutou, rau rangatira i ngā matawaka o ngā haue whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings, warm greetings everyone joining us from wherever you are in the world. Thank you for bearing with us while we had some technical problems, and we hope that you enjoyed the video that we've just played for you as by way of introduction for our session. So welcome to Te Waipounamu, the other island of our archipelago, sometimes known by its less imaginative title, South Island, which is a perfect way to start a conversation about arts and creativity and wellbeing. Who am I? My name is Ciaran Fox. It's my great honour to be the host to four far more interesting, talented and accomplished people here today, and my main job is to get out of the way and to let them speak for themselves. But our video, as you will have just seen, was to set some context around this place and the challenges, and also some of the incredible, innovative, creative responses to the challenges that that we have faced here following some pretty devastating earthquakes in 2011 that not only were hugely destructive to lives, lifestyles and buildings and infrastructure, but in other ways were incredibly destructive to old ways of thinking, being and doing. And that is kind of what we want to talk about today, and what hopefully we'll explore a little bit further with our wonderful guests. So kia ora and welcome.
Kia ora.
Also, we have space for Q&A, so please do feel free to pop a question into the conference chat, and we'll do our best to get to those. We'll allow a little bit of time at the end. We'll also, for those following the cricket, quite happily take some questions on that as well, although that wasn't advertised as such. So, yeah. Yeah, greetings. What I'd really like to sort of kick off and get you guys talking about is we've been with you and joined in to see Matua Enon and Ricky's session before also, and really struck by the idea of the genealogy of the taonga puoro and this discussion of the materials from which those instruments come from and go back to, and that got us thinking about materials. What do we work with? And I want to know, what is the most valuable material that each of you work with, in the full sense of that word?
Right. Well, for Rekindle, we're a resourceful craft workshop. And if I can sort of take it back a step, we work with a variety of materials, but something that is less tangible that we work with that they are connected to is this idea of craft. And craft for us is the relationship between ourselves and the life around us. So when we're thinking about using materials and we're doing that in craft, we are really needing to think carefully about our place in the world, our impacts on the world, what we're making and the techniques that we're making, the lineage or the whakapapa of those techniques, where they come from, where they're being practiced, the context here in Aotearoa, the history of Aotearoa, its people, and how what we do affects people, but it also affects the world around us. So it's a complex relationship, and we're really mindful that that is a really important part of what we do when we're working with craft in the natural world.
Nice. Thanks, Hannah. And so I'm looking at you, Aaron, too, thinking, you're working with a performative, form. What, in terms of materials, what do you work with? What's the most important thing you work with?
There'll probably two things. Kia hau nei ko te mea nui ko ngā hono ngā tangata, te moka tangata. First of all, it's about people. It's about bringing people together into a space where they can explore themselves, artistically, physically, spiritually, and as whānau, as people that are connected together. And if I look back, I think we've all had parents or grandparents that have told us that when they were kids they could have hours and hours of fun with a stick. So for our kaupapa, it's about getting back to some really simple things. Being able to use materials that don't cost any money, that you can gather yourself. Getting away from technology, getting back into a space where you can enjoy your Indigenous language, where you don't have to know anything to turn up, and you can just explore being yourself, explore the beauty of the community that you connect to. And we get caught up in so many things in modern life, and we get caught up, especially post-disaster, and all of these complex things. And so sometimes it's about coming back to ourselves, back to simplicity, and finding the simple values that we all connect around, and finding activities where, say, the taiaha or the rākau, the fighting art itself is what anchors the activity, but actually it's about providing people safe spaces to rediscover who we are, and to rediscover the things that are the most important to us, and what are the values that we share together. We can focus so much on what we've lost, but there is so much beauty in every community, every community, every city around the world has culture, and art and culture are inseparable.
Yeah. I feel like there's lots of nodding going on in the rest of the panel in terms of thinking about that answer. Any thoughts, Kim?
Yeah, well, I really tautoko what you've said, Aaron. For us, we're a visual arts creative community, so we have all sorts of wonderful materials in our studios. And thinking about this really highlighted for me that actually it's the bravery of the artists that we support that's the most important material that we work with. So if you've had, experience of mental distress, you've often had a sense of losing control or agency over your life, and so it takes a great deal of bravery and courage to step into the creative space and to step into creative expression. So the chance to use creativity to rediscover what's really important to you, and thinking about a whakapapa, where we come from, what matters to us. It's all about, rediscovering a sense of self. So, I'd highlight the bravery.
Awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I think for our, we're operating in public space all the time, kind of uninvited, not ticketed events generally, but just kind of meeting people in their space on the streets. And I'd say actually social conventions in some way is the main material that we're working with or playing with and trying to kind of invert or subvert. And it just occurs to me that actually that has a really strong genealogy or whakapapa as well. We get these what are good manners and how that gets handed down through the generations, and the sort of social roles that you feel comfortable performing in a certain space or not. And certain of those restrictions are of course quite necessary, but a lot of them are really superfluous. And so I think we're making interventions in public space to invite people to sort of behave outside of the normal conventions in that particular place. And I think it also keeps your offer, your response then genuine to that place. If you're really taking in, it changes block by block in the city. How do people behave in this block? What are the conventions here that we can then kind of
I think challenging social convenience, that can seem really intimidating, but doing it through play, like playfulness is a way to help people be questioning. It feels like that. And I know that Aaron and you have talked lots about the role of play and joyfulness. Do you think that's a way that we can build wellbeing into creativity? Is that, the idea of playfulness? Do you encourage people to play?
Oh, absolutely. You will have seen it in the film beforehand. Yeah. There's a real sense of joy and playfulness in the studios. And it's really a chance to leave behind, the stresses and the things that drag us down. And it's around that peer community lifting each other up.
I'm thinking about well-being and at the heart of it, we talk about particularly mental well-being, that a sense of meaning and purpose is core to actually having good mental health. And it feels to me like that's kind of the role of the arts in some ways, is like a tool of meaning making. Would you say that's true?
Oh God, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's whether you're making meaning for your everyday, for purpose, or you're wanting to say something, you're wanting to have a message. I feel very much so, speaking from personal experience, when I make art, that I'm trying to make sense of the world in some way and express something, and that really comes down to making meaning for me,
we started in that post-quake context where and in the, you kind of hope that it would happen, but in the immediate post-quake period, the government comes out and says, it's okay, going to be okay, everyone. We've got the crack team together of architects and planners and engineers who are going to rebuild the city for us. So go back to whatever it is that you do. And that's comforting on the one hand, but then so many people who don't have those kind of core skills that the government wanted felt that, but this is my place too, and I want to help rebuild it in some way. And so I think that was certainly at the core of our work in the beginning, was just helping find a way that someone like me could say, I have a role in rebuilding this place too.
I think that's a really fascinating idea, and bringing it back to that context that we're talking about, I guess, is 10 years on from life-defining major disasters, and in what ways has it changed us. I mean, most of your projects have kind of came into existence, not all of them, but as a result or as a response to the earthquakes. What has changed in the way that you approach that purpose in these years?
I think the thing that's come out of a number of disasters is that you come back to some very simple things. You learn very quickly about the things that are valuable to you and the things that aren't. And I think COVID has done that around the world, and we've had the opportunity here in Ōtautahi to do that now for quite a long time, to actually sort through the things that really are valuable, that keep families together. And I think also in the search for meaning within a Māori worldview, it becomes much broader than the search for your own individual meaning, but how you're making meaning alongside other people, how you share that journey together. And we know how important the connections between people and communities are to our well-being. As people, as human beings, we're not designed to be alone or to go it alone. And so I think some of the most beautiful stuff that's come out around making meaning is finding out how we fit together. And like all relationships, you know who you are, but who are you in the context of your wider community? And how do you find a role where you're valued, where you have something to contribute? And I think that's really important, is providing people a space to not just be a community or in a community, but how to lead something, how to have an opportunity to really contribute in your own way and to be and to feel important.
So I think some of you have said, prior to this, around the relationship to the context of the earthquakes, that maybe you didn't start off as seeing yourselves as being creative wellbeing, practitioners. Was that true? Like, some of you, maybe it was a more deliberate, intentional idea. I don't know. Was that the case for Rekindle, Hannah?
Well, with the grounding of Rekindle's work in the occupational therapy values and experience of our founder, Julie Arnott, it's always been a really key part of what we do. But I think as an organisation, it's coming into focus more now in terms of the projects that we're choosing to work on and the areas that we're deciding to put resources into.
Ryan, this is probably you have a different answer to that.
Yeah, creative well-being occurred to me about 3 weeks ago when I got invited to be part of this panel.
Love your honesty.
I mean, as soon as someone said it, like, of course, that's what we've been doing for 10 years, actually, but we've never sort of framed it in that way. And I guess coming from a performance background, so thinking about that kind of theatrical and social roles, and then the idea of those kind of interactions you get or encourage, the playfulness on the street. You could do that with a clown or a busker and all that. And the experiment that we set out with was, well, can you do it without the people? Can you put an installation, an intervention there that effectively makes those same invitations for people to play? But I guess because of that public space aspect, we've had a lot more to do with kind of urban design, urban regeneration. That's been how our work has been framed for quite a few years. Yeah.
We're sitting in a different sort of situation. I guess we did start our organisation to respond to the trauma that people experienced after the earthquakes. But, of course, through that work and as time's gone on, our work's broadened, and I guess the artists that we support have had experience of mental distress and experienced, disadvantage through that and a loss of voice. So I was thinking earlier that one of the things that art and creativity does is give people a voice. So whether it's processing the experiences of the earthquakes, which were very traumatic for many people, or whether it's commenting on other issues that are important to them. So recently, some of our artists have been involved in a project which is talking about the state of our inpatient mental health care units in New Zealand, and the ability to express that through art is a really powerful experience.
Yeah. Is because it's about giving voice? Is that?
Well, I think it's that sense we mentioned before about loss of control. And I guess the earthquakes was an ultimate experience of a loss of control. You never knew when one was coming, and the shock effect of that. But if you can think of that as a metaphor for experience of people with mental distress, that you lose some degree of control over your life, and the loss of hope and loss of aspirations. Art gives people a voice and hope for the future.
I was thinking, and yet that huge destructive nature of the earthquakes was somehow getting us ready in a way. Maybe it's easy for me to say now looking back, but it's like it was getting us ready for a new way of doing things and being things.
When Aaron was talking just before, I was thinking about really the immediate post-quake period, how so many of the systems and structures just weren't functioning, from like water's not coming out of your tap, everything. And in many cases that was replaced by humans again, as it used to be, right? And so lots of these systems, we had a bore water well in our backyard that was still functioning, so we run a tap out to the street so that other people can have, and suddenly in all of these, the automatic supermarket doors aren't working because the power's out, and, there's a human, a human has to do it again. And so there was something profoundly kind of rehumanizing about that period that I think we have kind of clung to and tried not to forget.
I'm really struck by the memories of artists and musicians feeling like they came to the fore, like there was, this is what we're for, and also that broader thing of the people, the community, welcoming that, realising the importance of creative expression, of not just entertainment but actually all of it, that this was kind of why we did the things we did. Maybe we needed to set aside more time for that. This was what we were living for. And it felt like that was a real lesson, I think. Do you think we're holding on to that? Do you think Christchurch's Ōtautahi is different or better in that way? Who wants to tackle that one? Does your hesitation mean a no? Is it a no? Is it okay to say no about this too? Is it, hasn't all been good?
I think different communities sometimes can be in different places. And if I look back on the history and the whakapapa, say of Te Whare Tūtaua o Aotearoa, this kaupapa that we're a part of came about, right back in the 1980s through tāpita sharples, as a way of bringing our people not only back to our reo Māori, back to our tikanga, but as a way of revitalising and holding on to the lessons of Māori weaponry and the things that we can do to strengthen our culture. So for a lot of communities, these aren't new things. We've been in this space for a very, very long time, and it meant that Indigenous communities had an incredible amount that we could contribute. And so some things that really affected people, water quality, supplies of things, access to various services, and kai, was kind of like, oh yeah, ka pai, we've kind of been doing this for a while anyway. And so there were things that we could contribute in this space. So things have changed for people.
I think what I was getting at, I was driving at, in that question too, was we were really struck by what the matua said earlier about, and traditionally for Māori there was no word, a separate word for the arts, that this idea was so inextricably woven into day-to-day life and living. And I feel like one of the things that we may have learned here is that we need the arts in that way that we needed to get the water back on and the power back on, that we actually needed our culture, and we need the arts in that same way. There's something about a disaster to really throw that into sharp relief.
I mean, in the experience of lockdown, during the pandemic, just really brought that home again, didn't it? That without the arts, imagine our experiences of being stuck at home. And picking up on, Aaron, what you said about the importance of community and the importance of connection with other people. The arts is a medium for that social connection. So it's the experience of the arts, but it's about doing it with other people.
We've been using the word integrated an awful lot lately, and working in lots of different places all over the country and stuff, and seeing that the kind of art and event offerings in most places are overwhelmingly kind of destination things that are kind of on the outskirts of the city, which you plan well in advance and you buy a ticket for and that sort of thing. And we're trying more and more to integrate art into the urban environment, into people's everyday lives. So it's not this, oh, should we go see some art? Or you know, it's not something that you have to make a conscious decision and plan time out of your schedule for. It just, it happens.
It happens.
And it's kind of a wonderful loop happening as well, because spending time being creative helps one to develop their self-efficacy and their sense of identity, which are the things that enable us to interact with each other and to have those strong social connections along with other things. And so if we can provide more spaces for people to spend time creating together, then they're developing those things, which in turn enable the others, and it just, you know, compounds in a really positive way.
So it sounds like I think we've been growing and learning a lot through this process, and I'm going to ask everyone in a second to have a think about how these lessons can be shared with others, other communities, like all of you tuning in to this kōrero now. But and on that note, so while you're thinking of that, think about those things. But thinking for you, please do drop a question, and if you've got some thoughts or you want to ask any of the panelists in particular, or as a group, a question, or if something hasn't made sense, or you want to know more about the particular context of life and work here, do pop it in there. Or, you know, potentially, I don't know how many of you are tuning in, but I'm speaking to just you. So you've got to ask us a question. So yeah, that idea of like shareability and generalizability of what we've learned beyond this, do you think there are lessons for the rest of the world from the life or the journey that Christchurch has been on? I'm hoping the answer is yes.
I think
that's a leading question, isn't it?
I think absolutely the question for me is how do we provide those lessons in a way that is effective and
What's universal about what you've learned? You know, what would be the thing that you would share, you would want to share? If there's one thing that you want people to take away from this session, what would that universal thing be?
For me, I think I might have alluded to it earlier in our kōrero, or even in the video. We can get caught up in some really big things, but we have a beautiful sense of agency around the simple things that we do each day, the simple things that we can do with other people. Every city has beautiful things located there, and beautiful people, and I think we can often, as cities, we look outside of ourselves and we see the beauty that's going on in this country or in that city over there. We're looking for the next big bright program that someone's developed elsewhere, and actually when we look inside of ourselves, each city has something that's beautiful, that is unique, a melting pot of cultures, including Indigenous people. And so many of the answers to just living beautiful, simple lives. It doesn't solve everything, but those simple things that we can do together every day, I think, are really important.
I absolutely echo that, and that idea that, I mean, there's everywhere you go, there's lots and lots of people who would love to be more involved shaping the place where they live, but we sort of learn or are trained somehow that, oh, well, that's the role of council, or that's the role of, and so both we have agency over our kind of everyday lives and small behaviours, but also there's plenty of spaces where we can take some agency and kind of expand out, I think, from those everyday behaviours into, actually, I want to share this with the people of this place and kind of make offerings as well.
And that might be the small things, whether it's maudako or, as we've seen earlier, connecting to taonga pōro, wakaama, the cultural activities that exist in our communities that people can connect to, that perhaps don't cost a lot of money. They might take some time, but when we think about the concept of whānau and family, that it's not just our blood relatives, it's the people that we spend time with who become like family to us, that provide us with those social connections that make us wealthy in a different way.
I think there's a real unifying thing about all four of your very different projects, which is that they're all participatory, they're all invitational, you know, none of them are passive, are they? Like, they're all about people coming in and being part of it and making stuff together, have playfulness, and, you know, none of this is about look at the great work we're making, please admire it and move on, you know. There's something about people get involved and they leave different, don't they? They leave different to how they came in. I mean, I feel like that's true of all of you. Are there any great examples of that you can think of? I've also got another question for you. Stuff's coming in on the Q&A, hot and fast, so ever think about that?
I'm not going to answer that, but just to get another part.
Have you got another thought?
I guess it's around our mental health system, and really how creativity gives us an opportunity to rethink that.
That's one of the questions that people have already asked, so there we go.
Too much.
Yeah.
You know how, like, our mental health system really focuses on medication and on clinical treatment, and that is not enough for people to thrive. So we all need the social connection we were talking about, and we need to do what we love. So creativity offers a really powerful alternative, or it complements the clinical treatment. And yes, I think my message is that we need to give space to that work, and we need our mental health system to recognise the benefits of art and culture, and and resource it.
Yeah. What other benefits to art and culture then?
I always come back, and I know we've had this conversation before, to something that Sir Mason Jury said at a conference that I was at a few years ago, around looking at what matters to us versus what is the matter with us.
Yeah.
Actually looking at the strengths of communities and building on those things. What matters to people? What helps people to feel strong? And then building on those things so that a community know that we value their strengths and that we see value in who they are, instead of concentrating on what is the matter with us as if it has to be issues and problem driven. People are far more beautiful than that.
I know there's a big part of actually some of Gapfiller's practice, isn't it, is that kind of, you know, we call it consultation, but it's often more playful than that, isn't it? But you enjoy going into neighbourhoods and communities and asking what people are interested in and what, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And finding ways to pull out those I mean, so many people have a hobby or some sort of creative practice that nobody in the neighborhood knows about, because it's something that they do late at night in an attic room or whatever it is. And that was, I guess, the thing. How do we pull those out and into the public realm in a kind of supportive way, so that not only that person kind of gets the benefits from that, but then the whole community sort of sees, wow, there's a lot going on here. There are lots of other creative people. Maybe I'll share my thing a bit more publicly as well.
I think, you know, the testimony to that idea of, you know, what matters to us rather than what's the matter with us was a project I was involved in Littleton, where there was an empty site as a result of the earthquakes, and you conducted a series of, over a couple of weekends, kind of drop in cups of tea, come and talk to us about what you would like to see happen here, or what does this community need. And the responses and the feelings and the thoughts were so different from what, you know, perhaps the local authorities had thought of. The idea of having an event, what eventually became a community town square, a gathering place that could, you know, host many different events. There'd never been one in that community before, and eventually that found its way into the council's master plan for the space, you know, as a direct result of simply starting with the intervention. We didn't have the idea. We went to community. We went to the community and said, what's important to you? So I think, and I feel like that is part of that teaching resourcefulness, going back to Rekindle here, and I'm thinking about, it feels like it's possible to teach those skills while doing something totally different. It might be very specific, like the actual making of something, but you're teaching people far more than how to build chairs or how to weave to coca leaves, aren't you? Yeah,
well, we're teaching them that they are capable, and that the resourcefulness is a broad sense of, you know, in the broader sense of the word. We see it as the opposite of wastefulness, resourcefulness, but it's also about our inner resources, and making sure that we have the tools and are equipped with the things in regards to our wellbeing that we need to practice in life in general.
Yeah. Oh, that's a glorious thought. So look, we're so pleased that you've joined us and spent this time with us, and we're kind of pretty much at the end. We've got maybe time for one last question. And actually somebody's asked a little bit more about how these projects actually started, were there government grants, etc. But I don't know if we're going to have time to be able to go around the whole, because I think we have maybe 3 minutes. But you had a thought on that?
Well, I have more a question about grants. Yes, there were grants involved. But what I'm hearing in the session before us that we listened to, there's a lot of people working at the fringes of their discipline, or not in a direct way. An occupational therapist making furniture, and that seems to be a really exciting terrain where lots of great stuff happens. But then, how does it get funding when the arts agency that offers the arts funding goes, well, it's not really art, and the health ministry says, well, it's not really a health initiative, and so
would there maybe that's a common experience for each of you?
Absolutely. I mean, the work falls between the cracks because, as you say, arts don't think it's theirs, health doesn't think it's theirs, but there's a really exciting emergent arts and health sector in New Zealand, and even these conversations are helping, I guess, build a case for it. And really it's time to look at the infrastructure, the supporting the sector, time to look at the funding, so that the COVID-19 funding that we've been fortunate to receive, once that finishes, where will things sit? And as you say, the people who are perhaps working on the edges and not kind of not in the conversation, it's a really great opportunity.
To further answer some of that question, I really encourage people, if you have just joined us sort of midway through, to access the short video that introduces each of these 4 projects that is available on the conference website, and also our speaker profiles there will have links back to the websites, really, which will give you a bit more of the history and the kaupapa of each of these really diverse projects. So we're sorry that we can't cover all of that in the time allowed. We're almost at the end. So just a reminder to pop any last minute questions into that chat box, and we may still be able to afterwards write back to you. Following the conclusion of this session, you're going to have a little 10-minute break, because it's kind of important. I mean, I'm thinking in the UK, it must be getting close to 11 o'clock, and so I don't know whether it's a cup of tea or something a little bit more medicinal at this time. No, who knows? But do please join us at the end of that break. We will return to Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, for the final session of the New Zealand portion of the conference, and we are really, really stoked to have had you join us today for this session to hear from 4 incredible creative responses to the effects and aftermath of disasters in Christchurch. Thank you very much for joining. Is there any last minute parting shots from any of my wonderful friends here before I throw back? Oh, they're all looking.
We're going shy.
Yeah.
It's actually morning time. We might have a cup of coffee. But yeah, once again, thank you very much. And thank you to our whānau in Auckland. We pass the ball back to you. See you after a 10-minute break. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.